Tonight we gather to celebrate resilience, courage, and the power of transformative experiences. Mr. President, leaders, and distinguished guests, my own journey has been shaped by two profound chapters: my father's survival in a concentration camp and my service in the Marine Corps. These experiences have instilled in me resilience, offered invaluable perspective, and deepened my appreciation for life's complexities. They underscore the importance of individuals who their courage and sacrifice go beyond the call of duty. Tonight, as we come together to honor such remarkable stories and achievements, let us be inspired by the profound impact one person's journey can have on shaping our world. It is my privilege to introduce and welcome one of those individuals this evening, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, a distinguished leader who has shaped the course of NATO's history. Secretary General Stoltenberg has served as NATO Secretary General since October 2014. Across a career that has included service as Prime Minister of Norway and UN Special Envoy for Climate Change, Secretary General Stoltenberg has shaped the global response to the most pressing challenges of our day. His tenure at NATO has been marked by groundbreaking initiatives. Under his leadership, NATO has implemented its largest reinforcement of collective defense since the Cold War, enhancing readiness to address terrorism, cyber threats, and hybrid warfare. Secretary General Stoltenberg's leadership underscores the importance of unity and commitment among allies, ensuring NATO remains at the forefront of global security challenges. Please join me in welcoming Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
Thank you. President Biden, heads of state and government, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to be with you here today, and it's good to see so many friends. 75 years ago, in this very room, NATO's founding document, the Washington Treaty, was signed. Our alliance was created by people who had lived through two devastating world wars. They knew only too well the horror, the suffering, and the terrible human cost of war. They were determined that this should never happen again. So they founded NATO with a clear purpose: to preserve peace and safeguard freedom. A solemn promise, an ironclad commitment to protect each other. One for all and all for one. I have great respect for the Washington Treaty. Not least because it is so short. Just 14 paragraphs, only a few pages. Never have so few words meant so much to so many. Peace has been preserved, freedom has been safeguarded. That makes NATO the most successful alliance in history. When I arrived at NATO 10 years ago, I was told that while it may be the most successful alliance in history, it was not the longest lasting. That honor belonged to the Delian League of ancient Greek city-states. But the League lasted 74 years. So in this 75th anniversary of our alliance, we can finally say that NATO is not only the most successful and the strongest, but also the longest lasting alliance in history. understand the enduring success of NATO, it is important to recognize our transatlantic alliance was never a given. On the contrary, it is a result of deliberate choices and difficult decisions. Starting with NATO's creation. After World War II, many Americans wanted to leave Europe and bring their boys back home, just as the United States did after World War I. Fortunately, this time, courageous leaders on both sides of the Atlantic were able to defy opposition and create a transatlantic alliance to deter the Soviet threat. Gradually, a bold and controversial idea emerged that we needed to talk to our enemy to minimize the risk of an arms race spiraling out of control and leading to nuclear Armageddon. Step by step, through difficult talks and hard negotiations, an architecture of arms control was agreed. Thousands of weapons were destroyed, transparency and trust built. The world became a safer place due to deterrence and defense, but also due to disarmament and dialogue. And in time, the Cold War ended without NATO firing a shot. This opened an historic window of opportunity and brought us to another critical decision: whether to enlarge NATO and welcome all adversaries as new allies. The countries of the former Warsaw Pact had already made their choice. They all wanted to join our alliance. Towering personalities like Lech Walesa and Václav Havel led the way. The question was whether we were ready to open our door. Some feared that enlargement would dilute and weaken NATO and provoke Moscow. Just as at previous crossroads, it was not an obvious choice. It was not an easy decision, and it took time. But in the end, we stood up for the right of every nation to choose its own path. We opened NATO's door. Hardly any decision in modern history has changed Europe more profoundly. NATO enlargement unified Europe in a way that was previously unthinkable, paved the way for EU integration, and brought peace and prosperity across the continent. Allies showed clarity and determination then, as we must continue to do now. Russia's war against Ukraine is the biggest security crisis in generations. Ukraine has shown remarkable courage, and NATO allies have provided unprecedented support. But let's be honest, not even our support for Ukraine has been a given. It is not straightforward, because our support comes with costs and risks. The reality is there are no cost-free options with an aggressive Russia as a neighbor. There are no risk-free options in a war. And remember, the biggest cost and the greatest risk will be if Russia wins in Ukraine. We cannot let that happen. Not only would it embolden President Putin, it will also embolden other authoritarian leaders in Iran, in North Korea, and China. They all support Russia's brutal war. They all want NATO to fail. So the outcome of this war will shape global security for decades to come. The time to stand for freedom and democracy is now. The place is Ukraine. Over the last 75 years, the transatlantic relationship has weathered many storms. We are bound together not only by interests, but also by history, tradition, and values. But our alliance should not be taken for granted. It was not a given in 1949. It is not a given now. And it will not be a given in the decades to come. Everyone in this room has a responsibility as political leaders, as experts, as citizens. We must show the same courage and determination in the future as was demonstrated in the past when NATO was founded and shaped. The future of our alliance depends not least on our men and women in uniform. They put their lives on the line each and every day to keep us safe. Yesterday, I laid a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery to pay my respects for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. We owe them an eternal debt of gratitude. We honor them all. Mr. President, dear friends, our alliance is not perfect, and we will continue to face difficult decisions in the future. I do not know what the next crisis will be, but I do know that we are at our best when we take difficult decisions with political courage and moral clarity. And I know that we are stronger and safer together in NATO. It is good to have friends. Thank you.
Storm, hold your head up high and don't.
Contains domestic fallout here at home. Democrats still weighing whether to replace him as the party's nominee after his debate performance against former President Trump. And today's summit being viewed closely as a major test as he insists he is not leaving the race. I want to go straight to our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, what can we expect from the president here?
Well, this is a world stage moment in his own backyard here in Washington, D.C., with 38 leaders of the NATO nations and other partner nations who are here. And certainly all of them in individual and group meetings will also be taking a measure of the man. Some of them, they have known him over the years, even decades. Others, like the United Kingdom's new prime minister, newer to the world stage with Mr. Biden. But a chance to assess how they think he is doing. And at the same time, another test for the president to reassure Democrats in his own party, lawmakers and voters, the general public, that, as he says, he is staying in the race and that he has the fitness and the ability to continue to conduct the business of the office he holds and the one he is seeking again with re-election in the fall. So for the president, these are key days to also highlight one of the things he thinks is one of his great accomplishments in this term, and that is bringing together NATO partners to support Ukraine at times when that was difficult and challenging, and in many ways it remains so. So that is one of the things we expect the president will talk about when he honors the 75th anniversary of NATO. We expect him to speak for about 10 minutes or so, perhaps a bit longer. That, too, will be notable because all of his public remarks since the debate have been watched with great scrutiny.
All right, Kelly, we'll have you stand by. Let me bring in senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson. Hallie, it's hard to imagine folks don't watch moments like this, speeches like this, without applying a sharper degree of scrutiny on the president's words and actions.
Yeah, particularly after what has happened over the last couple of weeks. And that goes, Lester, likely for viewers at home, but also for lawmakers on Capitol Hill, with tonight at least 9 Democratic members of Congress publicly calling on President Biden to withdraw. Remember, this is a scripted setting for him. It is not that live, unscripted, impromptu setting that you're going to see in about 48 hours at that potentially lengthy press conference where he will undoubtedly be peppered with questions about his age, about his stamina, about his fitness for office at this moment, Lester. But a key moment for him on the world stage now. Lester.
And again, that press conference later in the week, and a lot of expectation about this. But here is the president now approaching the podium at the 75th anniversary observances of NATO.
Welcome. In 1949, leaders of 12 countries, including President Truman, came together in this very room. History was watching. It had been 4 years since the surrender of the Axis powers and the end of the most devastating war the world had ever known. Here, these 12 leaders gathered to make a sacred pledge to defend each other against aggression, provide their collective security, and to answer threats as one, because they knew to prevent future wars, to protect democracies, to lay the groundwork for lasting peace and prosperity, they needed a new approach. They needed to combine their strengths. They needed an alliance. And here they signed the Washington Treaty and created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world. Mr. Secretary General, leaders of NATO countries, foreign and defense ministers, representatives from partner nations and the European Union, and members of Congress, distinguished guests, welcome to the 2024 NATO Summit. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to host you in this milestone year, to look back with pride at all we've achieved and look ahead to our shared future with strength and with resolve. Together, we rebuilt Europe from the ruins of war, held high the torch of liberty during long decades of the Cold War. When former adversaries became fellow democracies, we welcomed them into the alliance. When war broke out in the Balkans, we intervened to restore peace and stop ethnic cleansing. And when the United States was attacked on September 11th, our NATO allies, all of you, stood with us, invoking Article 5 for the first time in NATO history, treating an attack on us as an attack on all of us. A breathtaking display of friendship that the American people will never, ever forget. Through all this history, when great changes occurred, people would ask, can NATO adapt? And every time we proved we could adapt, and we did, evolving our strategies to stay ahead of threats, reaching out to new partners to increase our effectiveness. And here with us today are countries from the Indo-Pacific region. They're here because they have a stake in our success, and we have a stake in theirs. Today, NATO is more powerful than ever. 32 nations strong, For years, Finland and Sweden were among our closest partners. Now they have chosen to officially join NATO, and because of the power and meaning of Article 5 guarantee, that's the reason. It was the most important aspect of the alliance in 1949, and it is still the most important aspect. I'd also note, Finland and Sweden joined the alliance not just because their leaders sought it, because their citizens called for it in overwhelming numbers. Remember, NATO's character is fundamentally democratic, always has been and always must continue to be. And today, NATO is better resourced than it ever has been. I want to pause on this because it's significant. In the year 2020, the year I was elected president, only 9 NATO allies were spending 2% of their defense GDP on defense. This year, 23 will spend at least 2%. And some will spend more than that. And the remaining countries that have not yet reached that milestone will get there soon. This remarkable progress, proof that our commitment is broad and deep, that we're ready, that we're willing, we're able to deter aggression and defend every inch of NATO territory across every domain: land, air, sea, cyber, and space. My friends, it's good that we're stronger than ever, because this moment in history calls for our collective strength. Autocrats want to overturn global order, which is by and large kept for nearly 80 years and counting. Terrorist groups continue to plot evil schemes to cause mayhem and chaos and suffering. In Europe, Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine continues, and Putin wants nothing less than Ukraine's total subjugation, to end Ukraine's democracy, to destroy Ukraine's culture, and to wipe Ukraine off the map. And we know Putin won't stop at Ukraine. But make no mistake, Ukraine can and will stop Putin. Especially with our full collective support. They have our full support. Even before Russian bombs were falling in Ukraine, the alliance acted. I ordered the U.S. reinforcements at NATO's eastern flank. More troops, more aircraft, more capabilities. And now the United States has more than 100,000 troops on the continent of Europe. NATO moves swiftly as well, not only reinforcing the 4 existing battle groups in the east, but also adding 4 more in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia, essentially doubling NATO's strength on the eastern flank. Together, we've built a global coalition to stand with Ukraine. Together, we provided significant economic and humanitarian assistance. And together, we've supplied Ukraine with weapons it needs to defend itself: tanks, armored fighting vehicles, air defense systems, long-range missiles, and millions of munitions. The United States and nearly 24 allied partners have signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, and more countries will follow. Today, I'm announcing an historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line. They will get this assistance before anyone else gets it. All told, Ukraine will receive hundreds of additional interceptors over the next year, helping protect Ukrainian cities against Russian missiles, Ukrainian troops facing air attacks on their front lines. Make no mistake, Russia is failing in this war. More than 2 years into Putin's war of choice, his losses are staggering. More than 350,000 Russian troops dead or wounded. Nearly 1 million Russians, many of them young people, have left Russia because they no longer see a future in Russia. And Kyiv, remember, fellas and ladies, was supposed to fall in 5 days, remember? Was still standing 2.5 years later and will continue to stand. All of we allies knew that before this war, Putin thought NATO would break. Today, NATO is stronger than it's ever been in its history. When this senseless war began, Ukraine was a free country. Today, it is still a free country. And the war will end with Ukraine remaining a free and independent country. Russia will not prevail. Ukraine will prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pivotal moment for Europe, for the transatlantic community, and I might add for the world. Let's remember, the fact that NATO remains the bulwark of global security did not happen by accident. It wasn't inevitable. Again and again at critical moments, we chose unity over disunion, progress over retreat, freedom over tyranny, hope over fear. Again and again we stood behind our shared vision of a peaceful and prosperous transatlantic community. Here at this summit, we gather to proclaim NATO is ready and able to secure that vision today and well into the future. Let me say this. An overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans understand that NATO makes us all safer. The fact that both Democratic and Republican parties are represented here today is a testament to that fact. The American people know that all the progress we've made in the past 75 years has happened behind the shield of NATO. And the American people understand what would happen if there was no NATO. Another war in Europe, American troops fighting and dying, dictators spreading chaos, economic collapse, catastrophes. Americans, they know we're stronger with our friends. And we understand this is a sacred obligation. As President Reagan put it, and I quote, "If our fellow democracies are not secure, we cannot be secure. If you are threatened, we are threatened. If you're not at peace, we cannot be at peace." Reagan knew it then, and we know it now. Our nations will continue to keep faith with what we pledged in years to come. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to end my remarks in a slightly unusual way. NATO is an alliance of nations, but also made up of leaders. And one person in particular has done an extraordinary job leading NATO for the last decade. Secretary General Stoltenberg, would he come forward? So much of the progress we've made in the alliance is thanks to the Secretary. He's a man of integrity and intellectual rigor, a calm temperament in a moment of crisis, a consummate diplomat who works with leaders across the political spectrum and always finds a way to keep us moving forward. Secretary, you've guided this alliance through one of the most consequential periods in its history. I realize, I was talking to your wife, I personally asked you to extend your service. Forgive me. And you put your own plans on hold. When the Russian war in Ukraine began, you didn't hesitate. Today, NATO is stronger, smarter, and more energized than when you began. And 1 billion people across Europe and North America, indeed the whole world, will reap the rewards of your labor for years to come in the form of security, opportunity, and greater freedom. For these reasons, I'm pleased to award you the highest civilian honor the United States can bestow, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ask a military to come forward. ask him to read the citation.
President Biden nearing the end of his remarks there, speaking at a gathering of world leaders, NATO marking the 75th anniversary of an alliance that the president says is more powerful than ever. He talked about the enduring strength of the NATO alliance, but it was clearly a message being sent to Russia and Vladimir Putin about NATO's resolve to continue to support and help defend Ukraine. Let's go to our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Hallie, as we watch this, it's hard not to think that there are a couple of audiences that were important from the White House perspective, certainly a domestic audience, and, as we mentioned, Russia.
You said it, Lester. That's just what went through my head as you described the message to Russia that President Biden very clearly wanted to send with that announcement, of course, of additional help to Ukraine and those air defense systems, making very clear to Moscow, to Vladimir Putin, that NATO stands with Ukraine and will continue to do so. But there's another audience for this. There's a message also to those in the room, to the world leaders that have assembled here, that President Biden is trying to send, that he is strong enough and vigorous enough to take on this job for another 4 years. And then, of course, the message to viewers, to Americans, to voters of the case that he has been trying to make since the 12 days since that debate performance widely panned as disastrous, that was an aberration, not the norm, and that he, in fact, can be energetic and vigorous and is up to the task of what he's got to do. All of that said, Lester, there is still, I think, on Capitol Hill, a sort of grim resignation here that President Biden is going to stay in the race, that people in some corners suggest they need to get behind him, even as you've seen about a half dozen now lawmakers come out and publicly call on the president to withdraw from the ticket. We know that late today there are some political prognosticators that have suggested that in at least 3 swing states, President Biden is now slightly less likely to be victorious, that former President Trump could, in fact, do better. And some battleground polling that is just out in the last couple of days shows that President Biden continues to very narrowly trail former President Trump in 5 of the 7 of them, although inside the margin of error. So, listen, important moment here for President Biden, but there are more to come, and people will be watching. Lester, big spotlight here for him.
And watching the president concluding his remarks, awarding the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg. And now the speech is over as that meeting continues. Let's bring back our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, what were your thoughts as you watch, and what are we hearing from the White House?
Well, certainly the awarding of the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor, is a grand gesture that is meant to carry a message, especially to those in Congress who have not been as supportive of Ukraine, and a show of respect from this president for the long service of the Secretary General, difficult service. And so that was something that the White House had not told us about in advance, and it is a sign of sort of the importance of being the host nation of this. The president was able to work through his speech in a strong voice, declaring the key principles of his views on NATO as this conference gets underway. There will be other tests through the days ahead. As you pointed out on Thursday, it's expected that there will be a press conference. And what we do know from our planning is that will expect to have more than the typical number of questions we normally see. Very often, this president does a news conference with another world leader standing next to him, and there are 2 questions from the American press and 2 from the world leaders delegation. We are told that the president will take more questions than that Thursday, and that will be something watched very closely. Lester?
All right, Kelly, thank you very much. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead in our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day, everyone, and thank you for watching.
You've been watching that NBC News special report as President Biden makes those remarks to world leaders at the opening of the NATO summit. Clearly, the president appearing energetic, appearing forceful, against the backdrop, of course, of his campaign now in triage mode, delivering a message not just to the world audience, but the domestic one, trying to stop the political bleeding, so to speak, with plans tonight for him to meet with some key Democratic leaders, mayors, according to a couple of sources. And now the number of House Democrats calling on him to step aside up to 9. Which now includes Mikey Sherrill of New Jersey, who publicly in just the last hour and a half has asked the president to drop out. We've got team coverage, Sahil Kapoor on Capitol Hill, but I want to start with Aaron Gilchrist, who's live outside that NATO summit. There is obviously a lot of policy that comes with any kind of international summit, including this one, Aaron. But in this instance, despite, of course, the invasion of Ukraine, despite, of course, the war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, there is a domestic political storyline that is in so many ways front and center here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been, over the last week and a half or so, almost 2 weeks, this constant conversation about whether President Biden is going to be able to hold up, if you will, through the course of the next several months of campaigning. And then there was this notion that there would be just this really bright spotlight on him and everything that he does to see how well he performs. This obviously was the first time that we've seen the president on a world stage, on a global stage with a global audience since that debate a couple of weeks ago now. We've seen the president try to engage with members of his party through Zoom calls and phone calls that he's had with different members and different groups of members of Congress, as well as governors from around the country, Democratic governors. This, though, was the first time that the president had to rise to the occasion of a global audience and deliver a message there. The message that he delivered sounded strong. The president talked about his belief that Ukraine can and will stop Putin, he says. He said that Russia will not prevail in its war against Ukraine, a message that drew some applause there from the audience in the room, that audience of 31 other NATO country leaders, as well as other leaders from around the world. We also heard the president announce that the United States is donating some defense equipment, air defense equipment, Patriot missile batteries to Ukraine, along with the Germans and Romanians as well. This is something that the administration has been trying to do, trying to make sure that it was able to send money and equipment to Ukraine in order to shore up its defenses, make it more capable of holding off Russia, and, to the president's words today, ultimately defeat Russia. And so I think this is a message that we're going to continue to see the president push from a foreign policy perspective. And the White House has said that we all should watch him. That's the message that we've been hearing from the campaign as well, that President Biden is up to the job, and that we should watch him through the course of the events that he's been having over the last week or so, Hallie.
In some ways, Aaron, this seemed to me somewhat reminiscent of that State of the Union speech that the president delivered earlier this year, in which he also had a huge spotlight on him for other reasons, which he came out, delivered what a lot of his allies saw as an energetic and forceful performance, if you will. Again, in a speech, fairly lengthy in the case of the State of the Union, in this instance about 10 minutes, but, you know, longer than one or 2 minutes, where he had a script, where he knew what he was going to say, where the setting was somewhat controlled. That is not going to be the case for every minute of the next 48 hours, right, as this summit continues, most notably with that news conference coming up later in the week, but also in some of these settings with other world leaders when, for example, members of the pool can come in, the reporters, of course, as you know, who follow President Biden, who might be able to shout a question or two, where it is a bit more of an unscripted moment for the president. So there are some real, some other key moments to watch here coming up, too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The president is going to hold bilateral meetings with the new British Prime Minister. He also plans to meet on Thursday with the Ukrainian President Zelensky at the convention center here in Washington, where the larger NATO summit is going to be happening. These will be opportunities where reporters will be in the room, and as you noted, they tend to shout questions, hoping for the president to answer some of them. We'll see if he chooses to answer those questions. Certainly when that news conference happens on Thursday evening, the president will have a long list of questions directed at him, both about his health, I would imagine, also about his ability to continue to campaign and to regain some of the support that seemingly has slipped since his debate performance. And he'll address those questions, I would imagine, much the same way he did when he was on Morning Joe yesterday on MSNBC, Hallie. The president was testy. He clearly was fed up with the conversation around whether he can continue to mount this re-election campaign, and we know he'll be back on the campaign trail on Friday in Michigan.
Aaron Gilchrist, thank you very much for that, live for us in Washington. I want to go to Sahil Kapoor now with The View from Capitol Hill, and some interesting news coming out in just the last hour, Sahil. I think political nerds will know the Cook Political Report. It is considered one of the preeminent political prognosticators here. And in just the last little bit, they have now shifted their predictions, essentially, for several key battleground states, slightly more towards former President Trump and away from President Biden. I mention this not because this is the end-all, be-all. We're showing you Cook right there. This isn't it, right? But it is yet another one of the warning signs that some Democrats, where you are very clearly tuned into.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Hallie. It's been a bit of a roller coaster day for Democrats on Capitol Hill with regard to the situation involving President Biden. Just when it looked like Biden had put a lid on his defections, we got another one in just the last hour or so, a very prominent one. That's Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, a Democrat from New Jersey. She's in the class of 2018. One very notable thing about her, as our colleague Mike Memoli points out, Joe Biden in the year 2018 visited her district and campaigned with her as part of his travels out there to, try to support Democrats in anticipation of his 2020 presidential run, making that argument for electability. She put out a statement saying, quote, "Because I know President Biden cares deeply about the future of the country, I'm asking that he will declare that he won't run for re-election and will help lead us through a process toward a new nominee." Now, while the dam isn't necessarily breaking among Democrats, there hasn't been a critical mass of new members coming out. There's a lot of anxiety. They met this morning, had a caucus meeting. One lawmaker told me the mood is still shaky among Democrats. This person mentioned that there's fear that the age issue is going to overshadow everything for the president from now until Election Day, and that they would be better off at least trying for a new candidate, as chaotic and as messy as that would be. Some feel that keeping him at the top of the ticket is akin to effectively conceding the presidential election. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also addressed this. Let's play what he said.
Leader Jeffries, would you feel that the meeting was productive today?
It was a very constructive conversation amongst the House Democratic Caucus family.
Did you all come to a consensus on President Biden?
The conversations are ongoing.
All of which is to suggest that serious concerns remain among Democrats as to whether President Biden can win a general election at this point.
There's also this sense from what you're seeing from Democrats, and I saw somebody, and I can't remember who, or I'd quote them here, use the phrase sort of passive aggressiveness coming from some Senate Democrats who, while not publicly calling on the president to withdraw from the race, are certainly not giving full-throated endorsements of him by any means. Talk us through that dynamic here.
Yeah, there's deep hesitation among Senate Democrats about Joe Biden's candidacy at this point. And one polling average that I looked at just in the last few minutes showed that Joe Biden's head-to-head numbers with Donald Trump have dipped 2 points in Donald Trump's direction since that debate. That's a very short amount of time. Remember, the last two presidential elections were decided at the end of the day by much less than 2 points. In fact, much less than 1 point, Hallie. And Senate Democrats are concerned because it's very rare to see ticket splitting. In the last two presidential elections, both 2020 and 2016, just one senator of all the races has won the state where the presidential candidate of their party has lost. That's Susan Collins in 2020. So Democrats at the Senate level have very good reason to fear that there could be a drag on the ticket.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you very much. They're live for us on Capitol Hill. Lots to watch on the political front, but also a lot to watch down south and in the Midwest on the weather front, with more dangerous and extreme situations on the way here, including possible tornadoes. I want to show you this. Look at the scene in Houston after Hurricane Beryl ripped through. You see that tree? That's a huge tree collapsed onto that house. In other places, roofs are ripped off. This is NRG Stadium. Look at the hole in the roof. You can see straight through down to the seats below. The storm has been deadly, killing at least 7 people.